All right. So I'm going to turn you up a little bit. All right. So, man, listen, welcome all y'all. Welcome. You know the situation. We here at Pinoid Live. You know the deal. It's podcasting time. And we're going to do a deep dive on what's going on in the markets. It closed down 2,013 points in one day on the Dow. That is ridiculous. I'm making money. I hope you're making money. I told all y'all how to do so. You know what I'm saying? And if you haven't, it's all right. You know what I mean? It's cool. You know what I mean? Like, these opportunities come around once every 15, 20 years. I jumped on mine when I had the opportunity. So, anyway, we wanted to stand here and me and Cam are going to discuss like exactly what's going on with the markets and what's going on behind the scenes and do a deep dive in a bit of a nerdy type of situation, more numbers, all these type of things about how over leveraged these companies are, what's going on with the oil thing, what's going on with Saudi Arabia and Russia, what's going on in the overnight markets, where all this money's going. There is a shit ton of things affecting the market right now. The shutdown with the quarantines in China with Wuhan, and you know how like all these manufacturers can't get any parts. I'm going to try and give some evidence for the reasons why I feel the way I feel about things. And hopefully, you know what I'm saying, Cam, can contribute. And he's super smart. He's a really, 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 really smart guy. Maybe Excel will jump in here in a little bit. We'll see what's going on. I invited him. So, we'll see if he, goes home and pops in. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Anyway, right. So, Cam, man, how you doing today, man? What's going on with you?
I'm doing just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing just fine, hanging out amidst watching the fucking worthless goddamn media and all the weak, useless pussies in the markets fucking panic and shit themselves. But as you said, if you're paying attention, that actually can just turn into an opportunity. But as far as me sitting here watching it, I'm fine. Right.
Yeah. See, I don't believe any of the nonsense, like as far as like what's going on with like the coronavirus itself, right? Like I don't believe any of that hype. But like its after effects from what people are doing because of it are massively affecting what's going on inside of the markets right now, right? Like, so if you look at the numbers for like the coronavirus and stuff, what you really have an issue with when you really look at it is like, oh man, look, there hasn't been one child killed by this virus.
Yeah, no. I noticed that too.
Yeah, not one. There isn't one person who has been killed under the age of 10 years old. It's all, for the most part, just been old people. And as far as what that's going to do for governments, that should really help everybody long term. Like, to get rid of some of these people who are collecting the pensions, collecting the Social Security, chewing up most of the healthcare costs. Like, it is what it is. Oh, by the way, man, look, this guy got a channel, it's Mr. Whole Button. I'll make sure I'll put the link in the description in both Anchor and on YouTube. You got to go check him out. He does amazing work over there. He hasn't put up a whole lot of stuff here recently, but a lot of his stuff that he was breaking down the Federalist Papers, which is an amazing thing, and I think it's really important. I'll make sure I'll put the link in the description. You can go check him out anytime you want to. He's a great guy as far as constitutional law and government and all these things are concerned. Like, there's legitimately probably nobody better that I really know. Sorry, forgot to give you proper introductions.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of wasted. I pretty much abandoned that channel, but I might come back to it eventually.
I figured hell with it. You know what I'm saying? The more people get a chance to actually read read or hear the Federalist Papers, the better off we are as a society. So, that's kind of my mentality as far as things are concerned.
Yeah, that was my take on it too. I just fucking got bored.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the coronavirus. Yeah, back to the coronavirus, right? When it comes down to it, I do the same thing with the Machiavelli stuff. Like, I'm just like, oh, man, listen, nobody watches this. Why am I still doing it? You know what I mean? Like, it's the lowest viewed content on my channel. My biggest video I have moving right now is a video titled ERTH. It's called Earth. I uploaded it so that I could use it in one of my other videos, right? Like, that was the whole purpose of it, and people just watch it constantly for no reason. I don't know why. Right.
You uploaded it as a source clip, but that was the one that took off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know what you're talking about. It probably is just me and you that watch your Machiavelli videos.
That's it. Legit. Like, I've been thinking about gathering them all together and putting them up together as a podcast and stuff. All right. So, yeah. All right. With the coronavirus, I don't believe the virus itself is scary. Right? Like, if you're, between the ages of 0 and 55, you really don't have a lot to worry about as far as the coronavirus is concerned. And
completely agree.
yeah, the fact that they're quarantining cities and fucking up manufacturing is the problem, right? That's what it really comes down to. It's the interruption in global trade that's the real problem with the whole thing. Because when you have whole factories shut down in Korea, you know what I mean, like 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 factories shut down in Korea and they can't produce cars because they're missing parts from China and they can't make them themselves because, like, you'd literally have to build a factory to make one spring, right? You know what I mean? That's a problem. And it takes like 6 months to a year to build a factory, man it, labor it, the whole nine. So there's no point in standing here trying to retool when you know China's going to be back up and running within the next month or two, right?
Yeah.
And then you
have to go out and find investors and fucking find a place to build it and all this goddamn work just to fucking deal with what hopefully is a temporary loss in the supply chains along the supply line. All it really is showing us is that we're way too goddamn reliant on fucking China.
Yes, that should be the takeaway from all this right here. And like Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk came out about 2 weeks ago and said that next week he would have to start stopping production because he didn't have any parts. Right? And at current, you know, I mean, Tesla's stock is down like 40% because he can't sell any vehicles because he doesn't have any way to manufacture anything.
Ford. Yep, and as you know, that's the same thing going on in South Korea, and it's good that you bring up South Korea because that's, you know, the best data we really have on it. Because everywhere else where there's, you know, lots and lots of this virus going on, like China, we're probably not getting the whole goddamn story, and even though they're probably more important on the supply side chain, they're not telling us all about the business loss and all that sort of thing. We know that whole cities are shut down, but we don't really know much of the extent. Whereas South Korea, as you know, we know exactly, you know, how many people have the virus, how many people are tested, how many people have died, what's happening to all of the supply side and all of the economies, all the factories and all the shit that supports them and all the fucking food delivering. You just see it starting to snowball, things that are hitting each other that you weren't expecting. It kind of reminds me of that show Connections by James Burke, that BBC dude in like the 70s or something. Yeah.
I mean, that's really what we're looking at as far as the market is really concerned. And over the past probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, these companies have been like basically stacking sandbags, right? They've been doing a whole lot of stock buybacks and taking out massive amount of debts in the bond market to do it. Like Ford ended up having something like 400 times their fucking market cap in bonds, and they got downgraded to junk last July. And with that, with all these companies standing here having, you know, I mean, a massive amount of debt because they were having all these stock buybacks and stuff, they have to be able to service this debt. And if they don't have any goods to sell, they can't service their debt. People like Apple, you know, I mean, who have been down ever since all this stuff started. Tesla, Ford, GM, almost all the car manufacturers, Amazon, right? Like if you go on Amazon and order like a whole bunch of stuff at this point, it literally will not come for, they say, like 6 months at this point.
Damn.
Yeah, so like that's where we are with the global supply chain, and that's really what's affecting the market. Now, the oil thing is an offshoot of it, right? The reasons why oil prices were, you know, I mean, tanking, and why OPEC met to try and, like, you know, I mean, bolster the prices of oil is because of the fact that they have tankers just sitting at ports right now, like not doing shit. And they have like giant ships, you know, container ships just sitting with no goods to move because like all this stuff's supposed to come from China to America, and it's not being loaded because they're not producing any goods. So they've knocked off a whole bunch of the oil demand, and so the prices fell. And then, you know, I mean, Russia said, you know, oh, we're not going to stand here, you know, I mean, and not make money, you know, I mean, we're not going to not produce oil, right? Because their market is relying on them selling oil, and there are people like Iran and Venezuela who are relying upon selling oil. They said we can't, you know, I mean, keep the price up by, not producing. And Saudi Arabia said, well, fuck you, we'll stand here, you know what I mean, and drop the price $10 and let everything hit the floor and see what happens. You know what I mean? End up probably trying to buy, you know what I mean, guys like Gazprom out, or, you know, Venezuela, or the individuals in America, you know, who has like the fracking operations that have to stay above, you know what I mean, $40 in order to become viable as far as, you know what I mean, per barrel per oil, or per barrel of oil. And Like, so now we're on the level of where, these individuals here in like Saudi Arabia and Russia, like, they're basically tanking the entire market, because like these companies in America, that are like producing oil aren't viable anymore. They're not making any money.
Do you think that that's just an unintended consequence of their little war, or do you think that was intentional to try to fuck over one another and then everybody else?
They did it before, right? They've done this before, and they went and they bought a whole bunch of, offshore drilling companies and fracking companies here in America. I'm not sure. Like, I'm kind of torn because, like, I have like two thoughts on it. Like, the one is you can get like the Alex Jones cap on, and you go, all right, well, maybe this is like, more along the lines of they're trying to like shore up the dollar as far as things are concerned. Right, like they're trying to stand here because like all oil has to be priced in dollars and has to be sold and bought in dollars in Saudi Arabia, and with that, it's most definitely going to affect the price and sales of the U.S. dollar across the world and allowing us to import and export our inflation. So I'm not sure like exactly.
Let's stick with that.
Go ahead.
Let's stick with that idea for a second. So just for the purposes of exploring the hypothesis, if that was going on where they're trying to protect the dollar against everything else falling off by I guess making gas cheaper, who do you think is engineering that? Is it the U.S. or is it the Saudis? Is it the Saudis leading OPEC? Who do you if that were the case, who do you think is behind it? Who benefits?
I mean, like, all right, so Saudi Arabia has a massive amount of U.S. debt, right? Like, that's how they get paid. What they do is they sell it in U.S. dollars. They get to use the United States military as they see fit. And then once they get the U.S. dollars, they trade those dollars into U.S. treasuries, right? And the U.S. treasuries, pay them off, in 20 or 30 years or 10 years or 5, whatever the case might be. And so who benefits? Ultimately, the United States is going to benefit on two sides from lower oil prices because, number one, the U.S. consumer is not standing here, but using, a massive amount of money to be able to fuel their vehicles and transport themselves and transport goods across the country. But secondly, on top of that, if oil's cheaper, the dollar's stronger. So it's kind of like if, like, say, gold went from, back in the day, if it went from 35 an ounce to 25 an ounce, you would strengthen the currency by at least 10% or 15%, whatever it is, 30%, somewhere right around 30%, but right around those 25, right around those type of lines. And so with a stronger dollar, you'd be able to export more inflation and you'd be able to print your way out of this issue. But the issue is treasuries are tanking right now. So I'm not real sure where that mentality leads us. What do you think?
It's an interesting idea, and I definitely would have to agree that if it was going down that way, it would be the U.S. ultimately behind it, just using the Saudi Arabians to do it. But then, like, going back to the Saudi thing, they actually apparently have so much goddamn money that they can basically survive a year of selling no oil. Which sounds insane, but nobody else can do that. Everybody else has been borrowing on itself and fucking dicking around with with credit and bonds and all that nonsense in order to be able to continue. Russia and a bunch of the United States companies, Mexico, Venezuela, all of them that produce any kind of oil have been dicking around with their markets basically and everything, but especially in order to deal with the oil and especially the dollar thing. If there is a global economic crash, it definitely would be a good thing for the U.S. to devalue oil, just as just because it makes it so that their currency will be actually worth a little bit more, and they can print their way out of the problem. Although it probably actually won't print their way out of the problem. Once again, it just kicks the fucking debt, back down 20 years.
Yeah, and this is always been my problem with the Keynesian ideology, as far as when it really comes down to it, in that mental, in the whole mental strains of Keynesianism, is that I don't like the idea of indebting our grandkids to pay for our stuff right now, because they have no say in it. You know what I mean? It's literally taxation without representation, and that's fucking a really wrong thing to do. You shouldn't be indebting your children and your future generations to pay for what the fuck you're doing right now. You should be able to pay your debts as you go through. But with Saudi Arabia, Yeah, right. With Saudi Arabia, I have an issue of, or actually, I've read where in order to fund their social programs in Saudi Arabia, they have to maintain oil over $80 a barrel.
Yeah, but it hasn't been over $80 a barrel in a while, right? It's been in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the problem with the Middle East in general.
Still, I mean, think about you noted that one of their revenue streams is they'd sell the oil via the petrodollar, and then they trade that back for basically debt from the treasury. But also, they don't sell much oil to America. They're mostly selling it to everybody else, Europe and China and all them. So they're also making whatever money on top of that. So they're kind of double dipping. So it's possible that even at $40, they'd still be able to, put the revenues through, provided whoever is actually making the money from that first half, that first cut, that first skim, is willing to put it back down on the second. And they're probably not. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm just saying that, like I heard that they have actually, like, I remember reading about it, and somebody said that like the royal family had something like $80 billion or something, but that was the absolute lowest ball of the thing that that it could be. And there's been rumors going around, and I don't know if there's any evidence making it substantial, but with as much money has gone around with portions of the Saudi royal family, there's probably something. But one thing that I read said that they have probably something like $6 trillion. They just don't want everybody to know about it because if they do, then.
Well, I've heard rumors.
If people learn there's that much extra liquid, if they learn there's that's much extra liquid, liquid fucking currency running around in the world, it would fuck up everything. And there would be no point of them hoarding it and not letting anybody know because they want to be able to use it. And I think that there's something to that simply because that bin Talal guy, Alawi bin Talal, one of the, he was never a crown prince, but that motherfucker, he's invested in everything, of course. And he's using this specific money, from the oil going to the various families, then going to the Saudi royal family to do it. But that motherfucker's like doled out way more than $2 trillion, like over his lifetime. So I don't know where the hell he's getting that much goddamn money, but it does suggest that there's something going on with the Saudis having more money than they're letting us.
Well, like I've heard, like everybody's heard these rumors, right? Like legit, everybody, like it's kind of like the Rothschild thing, like the Rothschilds are worth like $500 trillion, right? I don't put as much stock in that as I do. I really think the Saudi Arabians there's fucking royalty in that family that's worth $1 trillion, like individually.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Like I absolutely fucking believe that. You know what I mean? I think that's a real thing. And if they are, then yes, they do have the ability to just to hold off and chill. You know what I mean? They can sit there and they can fund their own fucking government for a couple of years and not be fucking stressed out. But on the same point, I don't know if they will. I mean, they're going to try everything to not do so, but I don't know how long it's going to fucking hold out. That's kind of the mentality. How long?
If they are double dipping.
Good.
If they are double dipping that money, then of course they want to be able to spend it on whatever they want. They don't want to have to fucking take one side of it and then put it, where the other side is going in, so they can fund their goddamn government and their own economy. And that puts them in a very precarious situation. It puts them in the same one as everybody else that can't afford to do. But I'm just saying there might be if there is any truth to that they have more money than you think that they do because of that double dipping thing, and that they're hiding some of it. And as you know, some of them are so goddamn rich that individually, some of them probably have a few trillion and maybe $6 trillion in aggregate. I don't know. But whatever it is, they can probably survive, this fucking little OPEC war. America probably can't. The Russians and Mexico and all those guys, I don't think they can.
All right.
I don't know what Russia's going to do. Fucking $40 a barrel.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck Russia's going to do either at fucking. And here's the real bitch. It's at 25 is what we're talking about, right? I called this shit fucking last week, right? I was talking to Doku and we were having a conversation, and I told him, I said, Joe, look, you know what I'm saying? He's like, oh man, look, I don't think it's going to drop much below 43. And I was like, dude, if it moved from 55 to fucking 43, dude, it's going to go to 25. It's that simple. And here it is at 25. I knew it was going to drop down at least this low just to begin with. And he's like,
called it.
Yeah, I'm not. I know how oil works. It's not that difficult. If it's at 43 and they're still eliminating demand, it's going to drop to 25. There's nothing they can do. We have all these gluts and reserves, and I'm like, yeah, that shit don't get hit until it fucking goes over $110 a barrel. And then we'll start tapping into reserves and things of this nature, trying to lower the fucking price. But we're never going to fucking stand here and run through them while we're waiting for the price to go to fuck back up. That's just not how that happens. That's not how that works. You know what I mean? Like, because governments don't operate in the principles of fucking making sure that shit's profitable. They operate in the principle of making sure that fucking their population can survive and that their economy doesn't fucking fall to shit. Because that's really where the situation is. So I wanted to get into a little bit into this fucking short-term loan thing, right? Because like I really haven't covered it a whole lot. The overnight market thing. Have you heard anything about this?
Not really anything past what you talked about. I haven't seen anything when I went to go research what I was, trying to find some topics about this. So no, you'll be hitting virgin ears.
All right. So okay, I got an article here which probably helped sort it out because it'll put it in English instead of my language. All right, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York on Monday announced that it would ramp up the amount of short-term loans it offers bank in an effort. Hang on a minute. Let me get the interaction screen up. Okay, in an effort to keep cash flowing smoothly through the financial system as markets gyrate amid fears among economic fallout of the coronavirus. The infection has now sickened about 110,000 people as it spreads to the United States and Europe. Worries are mounting that the growth will slow dramatically, that together with plunging oil prices has sent global markets into turmoil. Well, the bitch is global markets have been in turmoil for fucking 2 months, and this overnight market started off in fucking July. Between Monday and Thursday, the New York Fed pledged to increase its daily offerings of overnight repurchase agreements, essentially short-term loans to eligible banks, to at least $150 billion from $100 billion. It is also increasing its offering of 2-week loans starting tomorrow to at least $45 billion. From at least $20 billion. Yeah, it went from $45 billion to at least $20 billion. Right, the moves are intended to ensure that the supply of reserves remains ample and to mitigate the risk of money market pressures, the New York Fed said in a statement. They should help support smooth functioning of funding markets as market participants implement business resiliency plans in response to the coronavirus. The statement said, though, it added that the Fed will continue to adjust operations as needed. The Fed had already been active in the markets for short-lived loans between banks and financial institutions called the repurchase or repo market for months, starting at the rates in that obscure but important corner of the financial system's plumbing spiked back in September. It had recently been shrinking the size of its injections as markets calmed. But demands at its regular repo operations surged as markets swung, fueling speculation by investors that the Fed might lift the size of its offerings. Officials have also been buying $60 billion in short-term treasury bills each month to build up the financial system's buffer of bank reserves, essentially deposits at the Fed. The goal was to keep cash flowing smoothly so that borrowing costs and money markets would stay under control. All right. Do you understand any of that?
Yeah. So I did understand. I did read a little bit about not that portion of it, but the initial problem. And the initial problem is a whole bunch of people were bitching at the lack of liquid currency because of the coronavirus fucking up the supply lines. So what it sounds like to me is they're selling really cheap fucking treasury bonds in order just to make sure that there's always money flowing around, which is sounds like some backdoor Keynesianism to me.
Yeah. Well, they've been doing this since fucking August, right? At least fuck September. Like this happened. This started in fucking August of last year. Right, where they had what's known as the overnight market, right? This is the overnight market where like they'll stand here and gamble overnight, you know what I mean, on the fucking on the after hours scene in between banks, and they couldn't figure out where the money was going. They still haven't figured out where the fucking money is going. All they know is they're just pumping liquidity into this fucking market every goddamn night because they had basically borrowing rates in between banks spiked up to like 11% at one point. And they wanted to keep the target rate around the same as the Fed fucking open market rate, which is like, well, at that point, it's like 1.5%, something like that, or 2% back then, before they started cutting again. Right? And so they've been standing here fucking, running this for a minute. And this is something I think at one point they pumped in $1 trillion in December into the fucking overnight markets.
Jesus.
Yeah. Right.
$1 trillion, and those are treasury bonds, so it's basically just shit they just made up out of thin air.
Basically, right? And like nobody knows where it's going. Like everybody has their own speculation. My ideology is that Deutsche Bank has the money, right? And Deutsche Bank is the one that's losing the money. Did you hear about what's going on over at Deutsche Bank?
And I heard there was problems. I never read into it. So what's going on?
Okay, so
and why are they taking fucking a trillion?
Let me break this down for you. Deutsche Bank pegged its derivative exposure at about $22 billion and faces challenges in shredding those assets. All right, that's bullshit. End of LIBOR and rising margins complicate matters. All right. Deutsche Bank created over the years a whopping $53.5 trillion book of derivatives contracts that it's now seeking to unload. But experts say that getting rid of those assets is no easy task. The plan, as part of Deutsche Bank's biggest restructuring in decades, is to see if its derivatives and other unwanted financial instruments that are now housed in its capital release unit or bad bank will be sold or wound down over time. Earlier this week, Deutsche Bank reported the $3.5 billion loss of the second quarter, including restructuring charges that will see 18,000 of the bank's 91,000 staff laid off. And that's every bank's been doing that as they move more towards using algorithms. However, putting a value on the complex derivative contracts that the Deutsche Bank wants to auction off is a moving target at best, says experts. People think that the dealers had this black box and it's very scientific. And Craig Wolfson, an attorney derivatives consultant, said in an interview with MarketWatch, but it's actually an educated guess. And most try to hedge their risk, but even their hedges are a guess. If all goes as planned, Deutsche Bank pegs its own exposure to the derivatives book at around $22.3 billion, according to recent estimates viewed by MarketWatch. Right? All right, and then they have a thing here. All right, so Deutsche Bank created trillions worth of derivatives, but its exposure is a fraction of that. The total notional value is $48 trillion. The positive market value is $364 billion. The net market value is $20 billion. So, in order to keep this bitch moving and rolling and trying to make money to pay off this fucking derivative bubble, I think Deutsche Bank is borrowing fucking money every fucking night. And what they've been doing is, you know what an overnight clearinghouse is?
I do not.
All right, so it's really simple. Clearinghouse is basically like if me and you wanted to like fucking go gamble, right? The clearinghouse would be a casino where we would go gamble, right? It would be the place where like I give the money to the fucking lady, she gives me chips. You give the money to the lady, she gives me chips, and then we sit down at the table and play our fucking game. And at the end of the night, you cash out whatever chips you have at the fucking clearinghouse, and they make sure it all fucking all registers out.
What is it? Some kind of commodity exchange?
No. It's basically like a fucking place that. Like they go, all right, you walk in and you go, all right, well, you're approved for this much money. And, another bank walks in and goes, you're approved for this much money. And then they go gamble the fucking money, even though they don't fucking have it.
Oh, so what is it? Like a banking gambling house where instead of gambling for money, you're gambling for loans?
Yes. And they're using U.S. dollars.
Deutsche Bank is somehow like extracting U.S. dollars via our national bank, fucking throwing out of these treasury bonds so they could turn it into some other loan and keep their doors open by keep paying the money out that they have to. What you said, it was $20 billion net, something like that. They have to just keep $20 billion net on hand so they can cover something like that.
Yeah.
Also, like going back to the thing you were talking about before, with from 53 trillion and then to 47 trillion, isn't that more than the fucking net aggregate assets of all of Germany?
Yes.
So they're basically in the same place we are with our national bank.
Yes.
Fuck.
Right. And here's the bitch, is they're betting with dollars. Right. They're betting on dollars with dollars. Right. Like they're betting whether or not the dollar is going to lose or gain value overnight. And the fucking value of trillions.
They're supposedly betting the value of the dollar to do it. So they're going to be doing pretty well, actually, since with this fucking oil drop off.
Well, yeah, but they've been betting the wrong way and losing the bets.
Oh yeah, leave it up. On that note, do you think that it's a coincidence that then that you're talking about like Ford doing all this short selling where they're selling their own stock back to themselves? Do you think that has something to do with this too, or is that unrelated?
Well, that's okay. So, all right, I got two theories about that. Right. All right, hang on. Apple is a weird one with this, where they had all their money in Ireland, and Ireland was acting as an offshore tax haven for them. And they wanted to bring their money home, but they didn't want to pay the fucking taxes on it. So what they did is they stood here and they took out loans to buy fucking their own stock, right? And when they took out those fucking loans, they paid the loans back with the money in fucking Ireland to fucking bring the money back onshore without paying taxes.
Okay.
Right? But the rest of the
Didn't
fucking
Dell do something similar recently?
Yeah. Fucking this is kind of like a giant tax dodge.
I get that. Right.
Yeah. But the bitch is I think these fucking companies weren't paying back the fucking loans, right? And the companies have all these massive amounts of fucking loans out. And they would be fine as long as the money kept rolling in and they could keep servicing the fucking debt. But the bitches is right now, they don't have the money to service the fucking bit. They don't have the money to service the debt. You know what I mean? That's the bitch. And that's why, like, you had, like, companies like Kraft just got downgraded to junk in the fucking bond market and shit. Like, Warren Buffett lost, like, fucking something like $5 or $6 billion in a day.
Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
And so do you think this is related to the Deutsche Bank thing? So if they're not paying back their loans, what are they doing with that money? Since there's not much money coming in, they're just sitting on it, not paying anything?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the situation, right? Like, so with Deutsche Bahn, they don't have the ability to pay back the loans. And so they just been gambling and fucking keeping the goddamn money every fucking night and like sucking up all the fucking liquid assets out of the overnight markets in order to fucking keep gambling at the fucking blackjack table.
Okay, I get you. All right, yeah, that put it together for me. Why everybody that I was reading on fucking Market Watch and CBC was complaining about the lack of fucking liquid. So do you think that lack of liquid is because of this goddamn Treasury to Deutsche Bank scheme?
Yep.
Yeah, all right, I get you.
And a couple of
they're going to use that because of this current other turn. So they're going. You don't know if they're going to be do good or well or bad because they've been making really bad fucking investments and bets. But with the oil crash, and that is going to just naturally make the dollar go back up. Do you think then the Fed's going to print a whole bunch of money and keep this fucking Treasury thing so that they can keep their fucking comrades and the goddamn Deutsche Bank going? Is that the scam?
Yeah. Well, they have to. They have no choice. Like, because the markets at this point is almost divorced. The fucking like the international markets from the regular fucking national markets, right? Like here in America, like on the street, just like walking down, buying a fucking loaf of bread. Like that market is completely different from the international market. It's a completely and utterly separate fucking thing as to how the hell the fucking money works. Like they can print money until the fucking cows come home into the international markets, right? And it just won't affect fucking the American markets in any way, because like all these international joints. Go ahead.
Money.
What?
So unless we're the ones printing the fucking money.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're the ones printing the money, but the bitch is that like it doesn't affect us because that money isn't chasing after a loaf of bread. That money's chasing after 401k bubbles and fucking, trying to short out the fucking dollar and fucking, buying and selling fucking oil in the international markets and speculation in fucking China. So like that money isn't chasing after the fucking, the goods and services here in America. And that's why like we're not seeing the effects other than when you're talking about things like insurance or college or fucking cars or housing, right? Because like real estate, something that is an internationally traded thing. College, is, well, something that's just like a government fucking scheme. That's a natural bubble because of the government being involved in insuring all those fucking loans. And cars, because of the fact that, it has to be, it's something that is built out of materials that are on the international market.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the prices are going up on these things, but on nothing the fuck else inside of our economy. Like, you haven't seen an increase in, fucking like natural consumer goods in forever. But there's fucking a massive increase in the cost of living as far as housing and everything else. Housing and insurance and shit.
They're making up for it using the banks via the loan.
Yep. So like when you're taking money out of a bank and like we have a massive problem right now where you have all these 401ks and shit that's going to have to come out of the market. And what do? Once they have to leave equities, like they don't have a fucking choice. Like at 65, you have to take a certain amount of money out of the market on your 401k. It's something like 30% out of your 401k immediately that fucking day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
By law, like you have to take a certain amount. And so if you have all these individuals doing this, and then on top of that, if you take out the extremes on the 401ks, like all the people who, they're fucking like top end earners or whatever the case might be, and they have a massive amount of 401ks, the average person really, honestly, only has like $150,000 in their 401k. and they're used to spending $45,000 a fucking year, and they're gonna live for another fucking 20 years after retirement.
Yep.
What do you do?
Actually, I know a few things that you could do, but generally, that them doing those stupid things are the things that have been fucking us over. Right. Almost as bad as the goddamn defined benefit plans. Those are defined contribution plans, so they're still more manageable. But so I guess the only thing that you're saying what they are doing is, and how this is working, is they're doing that same goddamn scheme where they keep just sucking up liquid from everywhere else so they can keep fucking, I guess, staying in this, as you said, it was like the aftermarket like loan.
Yep.
What did you call it?
The repo market.
Late night repo market, or
aftermarket
repo?
Yeah, it's an overnight repo market.
Overnight repo, that's what it was. On that, I do actually have a question on what you said. You said that I understand like why a dollar wouldn't affect a dollar that's going around in the international scheme wouldn't affect a dollar, a dollar's worth of a piece of bread on Main Street in Ohio or whatever. But it does, what you said actually kind of defies the fungibility principle, where as every dollar is the same as any other dollar, no matter where it came from or where it's going. You're saying that when it's on an international market, because there's so much other goddamn fucking manipulation being done, not only by our Fed, by everybody else that's trading that dollar, it actually is. It's not that it's worth something different than the one for the bread. It's that it doesn't affect the bread because it's outside of its Venn diagram. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, no, it's because there's fucking massive amounts of demand for dollars outside of the international market.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that there actually are two levels of fungibility with the dollar. There's the internal fungibility, within the United States, and then there's an external one because they're valued slightly differently because of all that manipulation.
Yeah, all right. If you give the money to the international market, right? For instance, this goes back to have you ever heard of modern monetary theory, the MMT?
Yes. Yes.
The big thing it's placed on is the velocity of money. It's like how fast does money turn over inside of a market, right? And that's what causes inflation, which is remotely true, because if you give, there's a big difference between giving a bank $1 billion and handing out $1 billion among the populace, right? Because if you hand out $1 billion among the populace, you'll see bubbles popping up in each market. Motherfuckers will be buying TVs or whatever the case might be, right? But if you give it to the bank's going to take that shit and put it into fucking equities and stocks, or, fucking loan it out to their buddies or put derivatives, you know what I'm saying? So it's not going to really affect the individuals on the bottom of the market, right? Because they have other shit that they're going to spend their money on. And that's kind of the difference between like the money printing. The reason why you feel the inflation from the government printing money is because of things like Social Security and Medicaid and fucking welfare programs and fucking military spending, with the fucking veterans and shit like that, because those dollars are actually chasing after domestic goods. So once you have those dollars chasing after domestic goods, you'll end up having massive amounts of inflation inside of our regular system on Main Street. But outside of it, once you get outside of the market and you get into the international markets, you have those dollars aren't chasing bread and eggs and fucking TVs and shoes and Jordans and all that bullshit. They're chasing after, fucking oil contracts and things of this nature. So therefore, those dollars never make it back to Main Street. So it's about the velocity of money and which way it changes hands.
All right, I get you.
You know what I'm saying? Like you feel where I'm at. Like it's a huge different thing. Yeah.
That by that model, definitely would suggest that since they are valued, I guess since the supply and demand works differently on the international to the national states, that there is a fundamental difference in how they're calculated, and therefore they are not fungible. They're not fungible with one another. Dollar in the national market is different than the dollar in the international market. You can't get.
Yeah, but they're the same dollar, right? Like, if you're like if somebody in the international market gives you $1,000, it'll still buy $1,000 worth of goods. You know what I mean? Like it's still a dollar.
It's not what they're giving you that's the difference. It's the demand that everyone's using it to use it for everything else internationally.
Yeah, that's the big fucking difference. You know what I mean? So like, and on top of that, it's about the demand for dollars internationally. So because all your oil has to be traded in dollars, because like all the futures contracts are traded in dollars, because when they're doing like the Bretton Woods agreement is still being honored for some reason. I don't fucking know why, and it's been out of fucking service since the 1970s. whenever you have a country like Kazakhstan and, you know, fucking India wants to do a deal, and I mean, or a broker there and a broker in India wants to do a deal, they'll change the money over to dollars before they'll do the fucking deal. So they need dollars for that fucking deal to do it.
Yeah.
You feel what I'm saying? That's what keeps, you know,
I know exactly what you're saying. I actually dipped my foot in that with one of my friends about 10 years ago when we were trying to figure out international monetary markets, and so we fucking took a bunch of dollars and bought Deutschmarks and bought a bunch of other shit. I just fucking eventually said fuck it because I thought it was too complicated. But yes, I understand what you're saying because it's too complicated.
Yeah, it is.
I just thought it was tedious. I thought it was retarded and tedious that you have to pay every goddamn fucking, every goddamn lender or broker or anything like fucking 5 to 10% for every for every exchange. It just wasn't for me. I mean, yeah, it's worth it if you're fucking talking trillions.
Yeah, I mean, it's well worth it if you're talking trillions of dollars. Like if you make 5% on a $1 trillion motherfucking bet, you know, I mean, you've made what, you made $50 billion, right? Yeah. You know, but like if you've made, you know, I mean, 5% on a $100 bet, you made $5, and how much of your time is $5 worth? You know, it's kind of really where it's at, you know, when it comes down to it. So like, this is the realization that I've come to with, you know, I mean, studying all this economic shit, you know, I mean, for my channel and all these type of things. I realized that a lot of the principles that we've hold dear inside of our heads, you know, I mean, and start thinking about like, you know, fucking markets in a different manner, like it's a wholly different thing, you know what I mean, than we've been like led to believe, you know what I mean, with like the Ron Paul movement and, you know what I mean, the libertarian movement and all these type of things. It's a whole different thing when you really look at the finances and get into the fucking math and start understanding really what they're doing. Like and it'll fuck you up because like you have to really start testing out your own theories and your own thoughts about things because like your understanding, like my understanding, not like yours, but like my understanding of shit was, you know what I mean, absolutely wrong about things. You know what I mean? Because like once you start getting into it, it's a different thing. But now, once you start talking about domestic spending, you know what I mean, by our fucking government, it's a different situation. And that's just like the Fed. Like everybody looks at the Fed and goes, "Oh man, the Fed's this evil thing," and I'm like, not really. The Fed's like the cucked husband of a fucking, you know what I mean? It's the cucked husband of a fucking gold digging wife. Is what the Federal Reserve is, right? It's the boogeyman that everybody looks at, but the reality is, like, it's just the government. That's all the Fed is. It is the government. The government is the Fed is the government. They're the same thing. But for all intents and purposes, when they go, "Oh, U.S. is in debt," and you're like, "Nah, man, the Fed's in debt." Like, yo, fuck them. You know what I mean? And they're the ones holding the bag, and you can always just shoot them in the head and go, "Oh, man, look, we took care of the problem." But the reality is, it's still the U.S. government.
You know, I'm going to disagree with you on that one.
Go ahead.
I absolutely agree that it's not that the whole fucking system doesn't work the way that you would hope it was. You know, nothing ever fits the actual theory the way it's supposed to work. Reality, as they say, you know, fucking everybody has a plan until he gets punched in the face, or in war, fucking every general has to plan until the first fucking shot is fired, whatever. So yeah, I agree. It's never a nice, pretty bow like we want it to be in like a libertarian or right wing. It's just way too complicated, and all this dog shit is embedded. I will say that it's true that the Fed is not the big baddie. It's just like a part of the problem. And I will also acknowledge that the Fed is sort of the U.S. government. I will say they're part of like a quasi-governmental corporation. But I will definitely not say that they are the government itself, because the government doesn't seem to have the capacity to control them.
Well, the government doesn't want the capacity to control them. Like, how will they fund their bullshit if they control them?
I don't think. I think it's the other way around. I think that the government controls the Fed by keeping the Fed fucking keeping the goddamn money rolling in and out through all the various dumb shit programs that they have to fucking borrow so they can pay down, and then, you know, every goddamn tax dollar that we pay pretty much goes right back to the Fed immediately from the Treasury. I think that it's the government is in control, but it's by fiat. It's in control by saying, you know, like a dog. If you're playing with a dog, you know, if you're sitting there, it's not playing with you. But if you're throwing the ball so it has something to go after, at least, you know, it's interacting with you. I think the government is the fucking person throwing the ball, and the Fed is the goddamn. And on that note, I will also say that I do think that the Fed actually is our primary core problem. And it's not because it's a big evil entity, even though I think it pretty much... It's actually, I think it made us too soft, in that the whole reason it was made is, you know, just to make sure that the usual fucking the Strauss house cycles, where every 20 years, like, you know, old people getting out of the market and requires a correction. And so there's always a fucking, actually there's a fall about every 10 years because, you know, it happens twice, but every 20 years there's a bad one. Every 10 years there's a normal mild one. The fucking Federal Reserve seemed to make it so that you could have maybe not the government, at least the banks that like dictate their own specific monetary policy in order to avoid that goddamn problem again and again and again to retain value. And it seems that they thought that they needed to because, you know, in the changing world in the early 1900s that they were coming into, and then after that, after World War II, when it became big, how fucking different it was. They were fighting out. It wasn't just a whole bunch of kingdoms like it used to be. Now, like there was a bunch of moneyed interests. Even with as complicated as like the Dutch East India Companies was, it's still not even going to begin to, you know, talk about what happened when we had the Fed. So I think the problem actually itself is fractional reserve banking. Not that fractional reserve banking is a bad thing. It's not. It's totally fine, and it works great for those things when you're trying to control the monetary policy, so you don't have these ups and downs that make everybody go fucking crazy. But if you go too goddamn far into it, like I think we have now, where it basically controls everything, then you don't get any of the natural fluctuations that are supposed to reset everything. And as you know, just like Deutsche Bank or like fucking Ford or Apple or any of that stuff, all of the goddamn like little fucking internal policy bullshit that they try to do eventually makes the whole thing so weird and complicated that they're the opposite of Saudi Arabia. Whereas any little thing happens to them, they're fucked because they're on that, you know, fragile bridge going from wherever they are to wherever they have to head. That's all I have to say.
I would remotely agree with you, right? I mean, like the problem that you run into, right? Legit, like the big problem that I really run into with the whole entire mentality when it comes down to it, especially with the Austrian model and the model of libertarianism in general, is that you run into this issue of what do you do when you have a growing population and they need more money? And you need credit to be able to stand here and like fund housing, you know, and like fucking have things like mortgages and investments in new fucking technologies and investments in new banks and shit of this nature. You have to have like an expanding money supply, right? And that's where things get really complicated as far as shit is really concerned. You know what I mean?
See, actually, I'm gonna disagree with you again.
Go ahead, man.
Not to say that you're wrong. I think that you're not right. You're not wrong. You're absolutely right. If you want a fucking economy and a population that's, you know, on the upward trend, you definitely need a way to make sure that everyone has access to credit. But I think that's a problem. I think that we have way too much access to credit, and that's why we're totally going overboard and fucking ourselves over. And I think we're fucking ourselves over so bad with credit that it quite literally will not only collapse the United States of America, but it will collapse the economy, and it'll basically fucking, well, you know, it won't like Mad Max us into feudal fucking, you know, like chain gang running around fighting each other. But I think it will fuck us up badly enough that if we weren't, you know, if we weren't, you know, humans that are used to having a society, and we'll always default to having a normal society where we control one another by, you know, making it so that we all feel safe in it or whatever. I think, and it will be that bad. And I remember you've been talking about this for about a year too, and I actually agree with you. But I do think that it's the goddamn monetary policy, and with so much goddamn available credit, that is a real core problem.
All right, I would agree with that with the banks, right? Having just entirely too much access to fucking credit. I would disagree with that point on the mentality that I think there's more involved with it. I think it's the fact that we had the lack thereof of manufacturing. We have the lack thereof the ability of the American people to be able to support themselves. Like, because in order to have a functioning society and a functioning middle class, you have to have steady paychecks coming in. You have to be able to export goods and build things. We cannot continue to be a net debtor nation. Like you have to fucking like manufacture and produce stuff and export it to other countries and have parity in markets. You can't have a country like fucking China doing all the manufacturing for you and you're just standing here giving out credit forever and using your military to enforce that. That's not.
I completely agree.
That's not how shit operates.
Well, it's 100% unsustainable. But again, I think that's like I think that available credit is the issue. So I guess here's the difference. And we both think that it's a good thing to have available credit so that you can grow, you can have people make their own businesses, you can have people buy cars and go to school and all that shit. We also both agree that there's way too much credit going around because we can see all the problems that we're having right now. I think that the core problem really is the fractional reserve banking making it so that credit is readily available. And what we should do, now this is pie in the sky hypothesis shit,
Go ahead.
but I think we should actually split the economy into three things. We should have 1/3 run in the, just as we do now with fractional reserves, so there's always that available credit, but since it'll be 1/3 of the economy, it'll technically be smaller, so it'll only be, it won't be all universally available. And I think that will reduce how much credit problems that we have. The other one, I think we should go back, we should break the economy up into another third, put it on some kind of standard, fucking be it gold or whatever. And then the third one, I think that we should invent a new standard, and it should be the lead standard, and it should be the one thing that actually retains its value no matter how fucking badly your society collapses, and that's fucking weapons and bullets. I think that's like the only way that we're going is not to split the economy, but to split how we do the financing of threes in order to reduce how bad we are so reliant on credit and how badly debt is fucking us over. With the other two, so the credit is there, and then the other two will make it so that once that fucking goes too far crazy and starts to collapse, the other two will act as a fucking mattress in order to stop the fall, so you can. Whereas I think where we're at now with fractional reserve banking, we can put delay the collapse off, but when it does, I mean, it's going to be fucking all pillars are coming down. Shit, there's no safety lines for this shit.
I mean, yeah, my pie in the sky mentality is that I think we should close the fucking borders, right? Just all of them. Okay. Nobody coming in, period, ever, like for the next 10 years, right? And let our population decrease. Watch all the boomers die off. It's fine. I know a lot of them are parents and we love them and all that shit. But it's time to go. What I mean? Let all them die off. Let the housing fucking market fucking end up collapsing. Allow the fucking poor and middle class individuals be able to have a fucking chance at fucking building something. And actually control the decline and stop the fucking government from be able to have this forever expanding population that they can continue to tax and print off money to pay for social programs. And have this be a regular thing where the population goes up, the population goes down, because that's the natural cycle of things. Over the past 100 years, we went from 2 billion people to fucking 7.5, almost 8 billion people, right? And the world population is going to peak at around 9 billion people, period. There's no fucking choice at this point. Everybody is in decline. Whether you talking about Saudi Arabia, Iran, Libya, fucking, Europe, fucking most of Asia, Korea's at fucking 1.5, Japan's at 1.2, Vietnam's at 1.7, most of South America's in decline, Mexico's in decline, America's in decline, Canada's in decline. And we have this conversation with the American fucking people and go, yo, look, our population's shrinking. You're not having as many kids. And we've allowed women to go get fucking jobs and go to fucking college and do all this shit. And that's fine. If you want to do that, we can do it that way. But let's let our population fucking come down to a reasonable fucking level. Allow jobs to become more plentiful. That way the worker has more opportunities to bargain for better fucking, positions and better pay and things of this nature, better compensation. Allow, your fucking housing market to come down so people can actually buy homes. Allow fucking, manufacturing to spring back up into what it's supposed to be. Allow assets to be able to pass down from the old to the young. And allow our whole society to fucking restructure to where it's supposed to be and cut the government's fucking legs out from underneath of it from being able to tax the fucking future generations that we're not going to fucking have. Tell these pension fuckers to shut the fuck up. Give every kid a laptop and send them home. No more public education. No more schooling bullshit. No more of these germ factories where the kids come home with the fucking Ebola every fucking year and shit. And we lose $7 billion a fucking year in revenue and fucking productivity. And, just allow this to become the country it's supposed to be rather than what the fuck where we're at right now.
A fucking man. I am 100% in agreement with you on everything that you said there. Everything you said there needs to happen. It needs to happen within the next 10 years or we're fucked.
I agree with you. Somebody needs to have this conversation. And it's pro everything. It's pro worker. It's pro American. It's pro everybody who's here right now. You don't got to deport nobody. Just close the fucking borders. All of them. Just close them the fuck down. Say, all right, you here now. You're lucky. You can become a citizen. Cool, whatever. And everybody just fucking figures this shit out and we manage the decline. It's a basic thing. It's not that difficult. And if you have this basic conversation, people need to explain it the way I did. You don't have to make it out like, oh, it's some cable tragedy. No, yo, look, everybody's going to be better on the other side. I fucking promise. You're going to be so much better off on the other side of this shit.
I was talking to my friends that, you know, everybody fucking like fears a looming collapse, as you should, because if things are going to change, you don't know what's going to happen. But I think that it's not only like necessary, but it will definitely be a useful thing, because through the fucking fire of bad times, once again, it'll create strong men and get rid of all the fuck. And I think that's really our problem. And I'd actually go a step further than you. Absolutely, 100%. We need to fucking stop. We need to stop immigration completely, but we need to fucking also start deporting at least the fucking overt criminals that refuse.
I think that should be an option. Like, yo, what if when you get caught for a fucking crime, you get deported rather than put in jail?
Exactly. I think not only we're going to have to deport the bunch of the illegals that are here, but I think the only way we're going to survive is by deporting the open, avowed communists to fucking Venezuela or China. No way around it.
Now, you know me, man. Hashtag Trebuchet. You know what I'm saying? Trebuchet these motherfuckers the fuck out. I'm not with the communists at all. But legitimately, like, I think, you know, we would be 1,000 times better off, you know, like if we just followed my plan and, you know, I mean, just sat here and did what needed to be done. Like, I think it's a better way of doing things, you know, and it requires honesty. That's all it is. You stand up and you fucking tell the goddamn truth. You know what I mean? And you go, hey, look, this will rely, and like, you would have to kill off a lot of things, right? You know what I mean? Namely, like, you'd kill off, like, most of their fucking ways of, you know what I mean, supporting their bullshit. Cut off Title IV funding from Social Security, which funds all the child support offices in the United States, which would cut off all the fucking welfare spending. You know, like, fucking believe it or not, 51% of all fucking child support, which is like $1 trillion a year, goes from men to women. And it's fucking $510 billion. It all just gets paid back to the state for welfare. You know what I mean? Like,
we've had that conversation before. That's exactly why they fucking go after people so hard, because it's not that they give a rat's ass with whether you're paying your child support. It's because their child support fucking supports all their other free shit for fucking votes program.
Yes, exactly. Like, there's a lot of this shit, you know what I mean, that you can cut the legs off of by cutting off they cut off all their bullshit. There's so much stuff. And add to that, like, yo, fucking the fact that you're bringing a man with a gun and a badge in the conversation about bringing life into this world is a patently reckless idea. Like, didn't y'all notice what the fuck happened when we had prohibition? You brought a man with a gun and a badge into the conversation, or the fucking drug war, or any of these other fucking things we done? Like, yo, no. You know what I mean? You want to build communities back up, build states back up, build fucking nation back up from the bottom. This is how you do it. You know, it's a really simple fucking premise. You know, like, fucking just be honest with Americans. You know, fucking you elect somebody who's willing to fucking put in these principles, and you make it fucking happen, you know, on a much better way, and you manage it to fucking decline. And on the other side, we all come off better off.
Yep. Yep, it'll just be those that are prepared for the collapse and being ready to rebuild it, rather than just giving up and panicking or dying like all the fucking weaklings that caused it in the beginning. And I think you're definitely on that, you know, that strong person fucking side. So I guess if it happens before we're all too old, we can maybe weather it.
I'm cool. You know what I mean? No matter what happens, I'm fucking good. You know what I mean? I'll pull the 12 gauge out and run in motherfuckers' houses if need be. I don't care. Like, it is what it is. But yeah, man, like, yo, I want to thank you for coming out here, motherfucking podcasting me for about an hour and shit. You know, I'm going to put this up on YouTube, put it up on Anchor. Make sure y'all checking Anchor the fuck out. You know what I mean? Fucking, like, yo, Anchor, and it puts me on Spotify and Apple Play Music and all these things. And, you know, like, we can, you know, really, you know, get down and, you know what I mean, do all this, you know, fucking maybe build a platform where, you know, fucking us creators can still get paid and have some type of compensation for fucking doing all this work that we do, you know, and, like, get this word out here in a better way, because, like, I know what we're doing, you know what I mean? Oh, by the way, Cam, like, yo, you got to check out Anchor, dude. Fucking, like, real shit. It's a better way of doing things.
Yeah, I definitely have to fucking stop being a lazy little bitch and get off my goddamn YouTube addiction and go fucking spread it out, because those commie cocksuckers are definitely on the way down. And also on that note, yes, thank you.